Welcome. Today we are stepping onto a wild, windswept moor, under a sky that seems to be in a perpetual state of storm. The wind howls like a living thing. The heather is dark and tangled. And in the distance, on a bleak hilltop, stands a house. It is not a welcoming place. It is a house of secrets, of violence, and of a love so fierce, so obsessive, that it refuses to die, even after death. We are opening Wuthering Heights, the only novel of Emily Brontë, and one of the most powerful, disturbing, and profoundly beautiful books ever written. Emily Brontë was not a woman of the world. She lived a short, quiet, and intensely private life, confined for the most part to a small parsonage on the edge of the Yorkshire moors. The landscape around her home was not gentle or picturesque. It was wild, raw, and unforgiving. It was a place where nature ruled with an iron fist, and where human beings were small, fragile creatures at the mercy of the wind and the rain. Emily was the fifth of 6 children, a fiercely independent and deeply imaginative spirit. She, along with her sisters Charlotte and Anne, and her brother Branwell, created vast, fantastical worlds of the imagination, writing tiny books in microscopic script. But from this crucible of isolation and creativity, Emily produced something unique. A novel of such raw, untamed power that it shocked the literary world when it was published in 1847, under the pseudonym Ellis Bell. It was not a book about polite society or gentle romance. It was a book about the dark, destructive, and eternal nature of love. The story is framed by the arrival of a stranger, a man named Lockwood, who rents a nearby house called Thrushcross Grange. He is a city man, accustomed to comfort and civility. And he is entirely unprepared for the wild, strange, and violent world he is about to enter. The house he visits, Wuthering Heights, is not just a building. It is a state of mind. It is a place where the normal rules of society do not apply, where emotions run raw and hot, and where the past is not just remembered, but is physically present, haunting every room, every stone, every breath of wind. It is here, in the dead of night, that Lockwood has a terrifying encounter. He sees a ghost. A ghost of a woman, crying at the window, begging to be let in. Her name is Catherine. And her story, the story of the man who loved her and the curse that love became, is the story we are about to hear. It is a story told by the housekeeper, Nellie Dean, and it is a story that will change Lockwood's understanding of what it means to love, to hate, and to haunt. Part 1, Heathcliff, the adopted stranger. The story begins many years earlier, with a man named Mr. Earnshaw, the master of Wuthering Heights. One day, he returns from a long journey to Liverpool, and he brings back a strange, dark, and silent child. A boy of about 7 years old, found starving and alone on the streets. No one knows his name, or where he came from. Mr. Earnshaw simply calls him Heathcliff. The boy is a wild, sullen creature, and his arrival immediately throws the household into turmoil. Mr. Earnshaw's own son, Hindley, is filled with a jealous hatred for the intruder. But his daughter, Catherine, a wild, tempestuous girl with a fierce, untameable spirit, is drawn to him. They become inseparable. 2 wild souls, united against a world that neither understands nor wants them. The bond between Heathcliff and Catherine was unlike any other. It was not a gentle, polite affection. It was a fierce, elemental passion, as wild and as untamed as the moors themselves. They would run through the heather together, their hair whipping in the wind, their laughter echoing across the hills. They were not just friends. They were 2 halves of the same soul. Catherine would often say, "I am Heathcliff." It was not an exaggeration. It was the deepest truth of her existence. He understood her in a way that no one else ever could, and she understood him. Together, they were complete. Alone, they were lost. But the world is not kind to such wild, ungovernable love. And the forces that would tear them apart were already gathering. When Mr. Earnshaw died, Hindley became the master of Wuthering Heights. And his first act was to punish the boy he had always hated. Heathcliff was stripped of his status as a member of the family. He was forced to become a servant, to work in the fields like a common laborer. He was humiliated, beaten, and treated with a cold, relentless cruelty. Hindley wanted to break him, to grind him down into the dirt. But Heathcliff's spirit was not easily broken. He endured. He swallowed his rage and his pain, and he waited. The only light in his life was Catherine. She was his only ally, his only love, his only reason to go on. But even Catherine, as she grew older, began to feel the pull of a different world. A world of comfort, of respectability, of the finer things in life. It was a world that Heathcliff could not offer her. One day, Catherine was bitten by a dog at the gates of Thrushcross Grange, the home of the wealthy and refined Linton family. She was taken in, and for 5 weeks, she lived in their world. It was a world of soft carpets, fine clothes, and polite conversation. It was the opposite of Wuthering Heights. When Catherine finally returned home, she was changed. She was no longer just the wild, untamed girl of the moors. She was now a young lady, conscious of her appearance and her social standing. She still loved Heathcliff, but she had begun to see him differently. The gap between them, which had been invisible before, was now a chasm. And it was into this chasm that the tragedy would fall. Part 2, The Fatal Choice and the Flight of Heathcliff. The return from Thrushcross Grange had planted a seed of division. Catherine was no longer just the wild, untamed girl of the moors, she was now a young woman who had tasted a different kind of life. The Linton family, refined, wealthy, and gentle, represented everything that Wuthering Heights was not. And Edgar Linton, the son, was a man of quiet dignity and soft manners. He was, in the eyes of the world, an excellent match. He was also, in his own quiet way, deeply in love with Catherine. And Catherine, torn between two worlds, allowed his courtship. She knew, in her heart of hearts, that she was making a terrible mistake. But the pull of respectability, of security, of escaping the grinding poverty and humiliation of her own home, was too strong. She had become a creature of two natures, and the war within her was about to tear her apart. It was to her old servant, Nellie Dean, that Catherine confessed the deepest, most terrible truth of her heart. She had accepted Edgar's proposal. But her soul was in torment. And in one of the most famous and devastating scenes in all of English literature, she tried to explain the impossible contradiction of her love. "I've no more business to marry Edgar Linton than I have to be in heaven," she said. "But it would degrade me to marry Heathcliff now, so he shall never know how I love him, because he's more myself than I am." And then, she uttered the words that have echoed down through the centuries, the words that define her and define the entire novel. "Whatever our souls are made of, his and mine are the same. Nellie, I am Heathcliff." It was a confession of a love so total, so absolute, that it was indistinguishable from her own identity. And yet, she was about to betray it. She was about to choose the world over her own soul. Heathcliff, hidden in the shadows of the room, heard the first, terrible part of this confession. He heard her say that it would degrade her to marry him. And his heart, already battered and bruised, shattered into a million pieces. He did not stay to hear the rest. He did not hear her say, "I am Heathcliff." He only heard the rejection. And so, in the dead of night, with nothing but the clothes on his back, he fled. He disappeared into the storm, and out of her life. Catherine, discovering him gone, was seized by a grief that was almost supernatural. She ran out into the thunder and lightning, calling his name, refusing to come inside. She would search for him for hours, until she collapsed, drenched and feverish. The separation was not just a loss. It was an amputation. A part of her own self had been torn away, and she would never be whole again. In the weeks that followed, Catherine fell into a deep, dangerous illness. She was consumed by fever and grief. The Linton family, who had taken her in, nursed her back to health. But the illness had left its mark. When she finally recovered, she was a ghost of her former self, pale, fragile, and haunted. And so, perhaps out of exhaustion, perhaps out of a quiet, desperate acceptance, she married Edgar Linton. The ceremony was quiet and solemn. There was no wild, passionate joy. There was only a profound, unspoken sadness. Catherine had made her choice. She had chosen the path of comfort and respectability. And in doing so, she had sown the seeds of a tragedy that would consume her, and everyone she loved. Part 3, The Return of Heathcliff and the Beginning of Revenge. 3 years passed. Catherine settled into the quiet, comfortable life of an upper-class wife at Thrushcross Grange. She and Edgar were, by all outward appearances, a happy and devoted couple. The house was peaceful, the gardens were beautiful, and the days passed in a gentle, ordered rhythm. But beneath the surface, something was missing. A wildness, a passion, a fire that had been extinguished. Catherine was not unhappy, but she was not fully alive. She was a bird in a beautiful cage, and part of her still remembered the open moor. Then, one evening, the door opened, and the past walked in. Heathcliff had returned. He was not the ragged, beaten boy who had fled into the storm. He was a man transformed. Tall, powerful, and dressed in fine clothes, with an air of quiet, almost dangerous authority. His face was harder, his eyes colder, but they still burned with the same dark intensity. The years had not healed him. They had forged him. He had made a fortune, though no one knew how. And he had come back with a single, burning purpose. Revenge. The effect on Catherine was immediate and devastating. The old fire, which had never truly died, roared back to life. She was torn between her love for Edgar, which was gentle and civilized, and her bond with Heathcliff, which was wild, elemental, and eternal. The two men represented two irreconcilable parts of her own soul. And they hated each other with a pure, undiluted fury. Heathcliff, for his part, did not hide his contempt for Edgar. He saw him as weak, soft, and unworthy of Catherine's love. But Heathcliff's revenge was not limited to hatred. It was a cold, calculated plan. He moved into Wuthering Heights, which was now in the possession of the drunken, broken Hindley. And he began to systematically take control of Hindley's life. He used Hindley's gambling addiction against him, lending him money and slowly, inexorably, gaining ownership of the estate. The boy who had been a servant was becoming the master. And he was not finished. The most devastating blow in Heathcliff's plan was his pursuit of Edgar's sister, Isabella. Isabella Linton was a naive, romantic young woman, easily swept away by the dark, brooding stranger. She saw him as a tragic hero, a misunderstood soul, and she fell in love with him. Heathcliff, who felt nothing but contempt for her, encouraged her affections. He saw her not as a person, but as a weapon. A way to strike at Edgar, to shame the Linton family, and to punish Catherine. He married Isabella, not out of love, but out of a cold, deliberate cruelty. He called her a pitiful, slavish, mean-minded Brock. He treated her with open disdain. The marriage was a prison, and Isabella had walked into it willingly. Catherine, seeing what was happening, was horrified. She knew Heathcliff was capable of cruelty, but this was something new. This was a perversion of everything they had once shared. She confronted him, and the result was a scene of such raw, violent emotion that it left everyone shattered. Catherine, already weakened by the impossible tension between the two men, began to fall ill. She stopped eating. She stopped sleeping. She wandered the halls of Thrushcross Grange like a ghost, caught between two worlds, belonging to neither. The climax came one evening, when Heathcliff, desperate to see her, entered the Grange against Edgar's express refusal. The two men confronted each other in front of the dying woman. It was a terrible, almost animalistic scene. Edgar demanded Heathcliff leave. Heathcliff refused. And Catherine, caught in the middle, finally broke. She collapsed, and the two men, for once united by their shared fear, caught her as she fell. The confrontation was the end. The strain had been too great. Catherine's body, already fragile from her earlier illness, could not withstand the storm. She was dying. And in her final, lucid moments, she spoke to Heathcliff one last time. She told him that he had killed her. And he told her that she had killed herself. They were both right. And they were both damned. Part 4, The Death of Catherine and the Curse That Continues. Catherine died that night. She gave birth to a daughter, a tiny, premature girl, and then she slipped away. It was not a peaceful death. It was a wild, agonizing, and profoundly untamed end. She died as she had lived torn between two worlds, and belonging to neither. Her last, whispered words were not for her husband, nor for her child. They were for Heathcliff. And when he heard that she was gone, a sound came from him that was not human. It was a howl of grief so raw, so absolute, that it seemed to shake the very stones of the house. "May she wake in torment," he cried. "May she wake, and find me here, waiting." He begged her ghost not to leave him alone. And he cursed her, with all the fury of his broken heart, to haunt him. It was not a curse of hatred. It was a curse of love. A love so violent, so possessive, that it could not accept the boundary of death. Her death broke him, but it did not destroy his need for revenge. If anything, it sharpened it. With Catherine gone, there was no one left to hold the monster in check. And so, the second half of the story unfolds like a slow, grim poisoning. Hindley, Catherine's brother, died soon after, a victim of his own drunken despair. Heathcliff, now the undisputed master of Wuthering Heights, took complete control. He treated Hindley's son, a rough, untamed boy named Hareton, with the same cruelty he himself had once endured. He degraded him, denied him an education, and turned him into a servant in his own home. The cycle of abuse was complete. The victim had become the victimizer. Heathcliff was not just avenging his own suffering. He was reproducing it, generation after generation. He was a wheel of pain, and he was determined to crush everyone beneath it. The most innocent victim of Heathcliff's revenge was his own son, Linton. Isabella, his abused wife, had fled to London, where she gave birth to a weak, sickly boy. After her death, the boy was sent to live with his father. Linton was the opposite of Heathcliff in every way. He was frail, cowardly, and manipulative, a creature of the drawing-room, not the moor. Heathcliff despised him. But he saw in him a tool. A final, perfect piece in his grand design. By forcing a marriage between Linton and Catherine's daughter, the young Cathy, he could finally unite the two great estates Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange under his control. It was a plan of pure, cold, and legalistic cruelty. And he executed it with a precision that was utterly chilling. The end of the plan was swift and brutal. Edgar Linton, Catherine's gentle husband, died. Young Cathy, now an orphan, was lured to Wuthering Heights and forced to marry the dying Linton. The boy died soon after, leaving the 17-year-old Cathy a virtual prisoner in the house of her enemy. Heathcliff had won. He had taken everything from the two families that had wronged him. He had avenged every slight, every humiliation, every moment of pain. And yet, he was not satisfied. There was no peace. There was no joy. There was only the endless, aching absence of Catherine. He began to see her everywhere. In the shadows. In the corner of his eye. In the howl of the wind on the moor. He would lock himself in her old room, and the servants would hear him talking to her. "Come in. Come in," he would say. "My heart's darling, hear me this time, Catherine, at last." The revenge was complete, but the ghost remained. And the ghost was not his prisoner. He was hers. The story of Wuthering Heights does not end with a bang, but with a whisper. Heathcliff, the great, dark engine of revenge, finally died. They found him in Catherine's old room, his eyes open, a strange, almost peaceful smile on his face. The window was open, and the rain had soaked his clothes. The housekeeper, Nellie Dean, who had watched over him since he was a boy, said he looked like a man who had finally found what he was looking for. And the locals, the simple folk of the moors, began to tell a strange tale. They said that on stormy nights, the ghosts of Heathcliff and Catherine could be seen walking together on the moor, finally united, finally free. But the story is not just about the dead. It is also about the living. Young Cathy, the daughter of Catherine, and Hareton, the son of Hindley, did not follow the path of their parents. They broke the cycle. Instead of hatred and cruelty, they found in each other a quiet, stubborn, and ultimately healing love. They were the last, surviving children of the two warring families, and they chose peace. The final image of the novel is not one of horror, but of fragile, hard-won hope. A new generation, planting flowers in the garden where once there was only thorns. The curse, it seems, had finally been lifted. Emily Brontë did not write a simple love story. She wrote a story about the darkest, most dangerous, and most primal form of love, the love that refuses to be tamed, that refuses to be reasoned with, that survives even death. Heathcliff and Catherine were not good people. They were not even likable. But their love was a force of nature, as wild and as unconquerable as the moors themselves. And the book is a warning. A warning that such love, when combined with pride, jealousy, and the cruel structures of society, can become a poison. A poison that destroys everything in its path, and that lingers in the blood for generations. The moors of Yorkshire are still there, wild and windswept, just as they were in Emily Brontë's time. And if you stand very still, on a dark, stormy night, you might just hear them. Two voices, carried on the wind. One calling for the other. And the other, finally, answering. I am Melesias. This has been the story of Wuthering Heights, as I have understood it. Thank you for listening. If this dark, haunting journey has touched you, please subscribe. And remember, love, in its truest and most terrible form, is a force that neither time, nor distance, nor even death, can truly conquer. Until next time.